A veil indicates that there's something sacred and precious on the other side. And if you'll do a little bit of preparation, you can go there.
Real quick, so the colors of the temple represent the material world, right?
Right, air, fire, and earth,
earth, right? And so essentially the veil is mortality. It is the material world that is keeping us from God.
So now it's not an earthly mortal high priest who goes in with the blood to put on the altar. It is the great high priest who has offered his own blood as the sacrifice. He has put himself on the altar.
People make fun of us all the time for magic underwear or whatever, but literally the ancients, they wore this veil as a symbol of Jesus Christ.
Right.
Yes.
Like that's exactly what we are doing today.
That veil was there to protect them from the presence of the Lord because they weren't ready, because they had lost that glory and the ability to be in his presence. I think veils very much do the same for us. They prevent the profane from accessing the sacred too soon when things are not prepared.
Look, I get it. You don't want to see our faces yapping any more than you need to because Andrea is about to blow your mind for a second time, depending on how many videos you've watched of her. The first time she came on our channel, I mean, the views speak for themselves, but this one
I think this one's better. This one, you're going to want to share it around to the same people that you shared the first video to because it is absolutely epic.
Yeah, but we got something important that we want to talk to you about.
So, as we've alluded to on the channel, Jackson and I, we are in the United States Marine Corps Reserves, and we are being activated right now with our unit. We are going to be sent away for a long period of time, away from our families and away from the channel. So, obviously, we don't want the Stick of Joseph to die. We love the things that we have been doing, and we need your help to get enough resources to add people to our team so that the Stick of Joseph can continue.
Yeah, because over the past month and a half, we thought we were going to have to scramble to put together some good stuff to be released while we're gone. But we've been able to get connected with incredible people like Jared Halverson. I'm not going to name all the people that we've filmed with just because I'll miss some, but we've filmed some incredible stuff.
So that content that Jackson's talking about has already been shot, but we need help editing it. And so we need to add new members to the team. Plus, while we're gone, Andrea Woodmansee, Dave and Mike Butler, Dave and Mike, they're not married, but Mike Day and Dave Butler are going to continue to produce content for the channel. And so we need new team members to be able to make that happen while we're gone fulfilling our military service.
So an extremely generous organization called the Holy Scripture Research Foundation has offered to generously accept tax-deductible donations on our behalf to be able to contribute the resources that will go to keeping this channel running. And so in the link in the description, there's a link to a donor box that makes it super simple to either give a monthly contribution or if you just want to donate a one-time thing, whatever you want to do will help, and we're so incredibly grateful for any contribution that is made.
It's been amazing and overwhelming to see the community that's been built by the Stick of Joseph. We feel like we are all on the same team. Me and Jackson, all we do is invite people on to teach us, and I feel like we're learning right alongside you guys, and so we want that to continue. So,
and I'll just say this, on the link, just go check it out. Even if you don't have the means to donate, just go check it out because I compiled a list of like some of the best comments from you guys that are literally just so cool to see the type of stuff that people are learning from the channel. So it's super eye-opening, but if you're someone that has greater means that wants to make a larger donation, you can shoot an email at jackson@thestickofjoseph or hayden@thestickofjoseph.com.
Because in reality, the Stick of Joseph is way bigger than the Paul brothers, and we want it to continue even in our absence. So please help us out, and without further ado, let's get into the video.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another wonderful episode of The Stick of Joseph. We are so privileged to have the Andrea Woodmansee in the studio. Why? Because we still haven't slept from the live event we did last night. Andrea was talking before the live stream. Women have the luxury of wearing makeup to cover their tiredness, and Hayden and I just kind of wear it on our face. And so we talked to Andrea. We just told her a subject that we want to learn a little bit more about, but we're going in completely blind. And so Andrea is going to be our teacher today.
Tell us about the veil.
Tell us about the veil.
Veil, the temple mean?
First of all, there's no makeup here. This is just the glow from after the live stream.
How dare I say that?
There's one hair we gotta fix.
Yeah, that works.
One hair we gotta fix.
Just pull it out.
Sure?
That's what I do. I just pull it out.
coming out.
Yep, do it.
Nope, missed it. Or did I get it?
Okay.
Got it.
Just grab the
All right. Well,
Hey, we might keep that in, honestly. I love that.
Get better. So, awesome. Andrea, talk to us. What are we talking about today? And let's just get right
Okay, so
into
we're going to, there are many unique things about our faith. Of course, the temple is a very unique thing about our faith. And something that's very different in the temple is this whole idea of veils.
Yes.
And sometimes it can confuse people. It makes you wonder, like, what's the deal with the veils? And certainly my first time through the temple, I had that question because it was something that we don't see in our regular Sunday worship services. But if you stop and think about it, it's actually kind of mundane in a lot of respects. Like, what happens at every wedding, whether in the church or not? The bride is wearing a veil. Why do we do that? Like,
why do we do that?
Yeah,
I don't
right?
know. Mm-hmm.
I mean, so my husband's a convert to the church, and so we got to do a separate little ceremony outside the temple, and that was kind of fun because my dad got to walk me down the aisle, and I got to
like the traditional wedding.
Yeah, the traditional wedding, and I got to wear a veil, and I remember going to pick out that veil, and that was so fun for me as a veil, like picking out my veil to wear on my wedding day, because it was pretty. And that's kind of as far as I went with it. Like, I just wanted something pretty, but I never stopped to consider, like, why am I doing this? What is this all about? So, but I think what we're seeing there, that's an instance where veils are very familiar to us because we see them all throughout our culture. It's a normal part of our culture, so we don't even question it, right? But then you get into the temple and it's like, oh, well, this is different. And so then you start to wonder about it.
Could you do things with it during this, or before you used to do things during the ceremony for the women? And then obviously the veil plays a big role in the end of the ceremony.
Exactly. But if you think about it, veils are actually a common part of our life every day, at every wedding, where we're used to seeing them. So when we see veils in the regular traditional wedding ceremonies, it's just unquestioned. But those veils draw, I believe, from the ancient wedding ceremonies, the ancient temple ceremonies. And that's why we use them. And so what we see in the modern traditional wedding is a remnant of that ancient temple ceremony. So
what was its original meaning then? If it's kind of lost its meaning, it's just kind of pretty, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So let's get into that. So we live in a world that's really steeped in feminism, and from that grows this sense that if you're veiling something, that's because you don't want to see it. And so if you're veiling a woman, it seems like you're subjecting her, or you're trying to hide her, or you're making her subservient somehow. That's not how the ancients saw it. Okay, certainly that happens in some cases. But I don't believe that was the original meaning or symbolism of it. So we also live in a world today where we equate authenticity with revealing everything. And so, I mean, our day and age, everything's out in the open, right? Yes. And so the sense becomes that if you're concealing something, that there's something nefarious, or you have something to hide, or it's lesser, or it's not good. And really coming from an ancient mindset, it's the opposite. That something that is sacred and pure and good should be covered, should be concealed, because it's not there just for anyone to participate in or consume, or, veiling was considered to be a mark of sanctity.
Yes, and so I want to point something out that we learned when we were talking to Mike Day and Dave Butler. A good way of describing what you just said, that everything is out in the open, and we don't have any sacred spaces anymore.
Right.
And the word profane comes from the Latin profanos, which means outside the temple, not sacred.
Yeah.
And so we live in a profane society where everything is out in the open. And so whenever we keep anything sacred, it is looked upon suspiciously.
Right.
As if what do they have to hide? And it's like, this used to be, having sacred spaces that were not out in the profane world used to be commonplace. and they just aren't anymore.
Right.
Dude, that's such an example of calling good evil and evil good.
It absolutely is. But I think your point is exactly right. And that's the purpose of a veil, is to create a division between the sacred and the profane. That, what's outside the veil is commonplace and it's accessible to everyone, but what's behind the veil is special. It's different from your everyday experience. It should be. It's special. But the interesting thing is, it's not a wall, right? It's a veil. And so a veil is meant to be traversed, right? Just to get a little bit political, we're not talking about putting a veil at the southern border, right? Because a veil is not a permanent structure. A veil indicates that there's something sacred and precious on the other side. And if you'll do a little bit of preparation, you can go there.
Okay, that is really cool. This idea that it isn't a barrier to keep everyone away. It's almost like a reminder that there are certain commitments that need to be made before you enter into the presence of that. And so that's beautiful in the temple, and then also when it comes to the wedding ceremony,
right?
The veil,
yeah,
the woman,
right?
It's amazing.
And this is jumping ahead a little bit, but in that traditional wedding ceremony, when the bride comes out wearing the veil and she has her face veiled, who lifts the veil? Think about it.
Is it
the bridegroom?
Is it the man? I don't know.
No.
Is that herself? No.
Traditionally, it's the father of the bride.
Okay.
Oh, really?
That lifts the veil. There's some reasons for that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
excited to hear more about that. That's interesting.
So yeah, a veil is there to both conceal and reveal. So because it's this division between the sacred and the profane, it's there to conceal what's on the side, but also for those who are prepared to traverse that veil so that things can be revealed.
Okay.
So, and interestingly, when it comes to the temple, what's on the other side of the veil is really eternity, right?
Yeah.
It's celestial. And the Hebrew word for, two Hebrew words. The Hebrew words for eternity and conceal actually share the same root.
Yeah.
So they both derive from the same word. So eternity, in a sense, is something that is concealed. It's meant to be concealed because there's a preparation that goes into accessing it.
Interesting.
So,
and this word, if I might be, because there's a lot of different Hebrew words.
Right.
Are you talking about the one that uses the same same words as Alma and Alma
Yes.
and virgin? So
Yes.
virgin, conceal, and eternity have this thing all together.
right. That means those ideas in the Hebrew mind and in that ancient covenant mind are all part of the same thing, right? So to be pure, to be virgin, to be concealed or to be veiled, and to access eternity all go hand in hand. They all belong to the same thing.
Wow.
So with that in mind, it helps to think of the ancient temples, or like the tabernacle in the wilderness that Moses constructed. And we get a description of, there were two veils in that temple. The veil between the holy place and the Holy of Holies, we get a description in Exodus 26:33, and I'll just read it real quick. It says, "And thou shalt hang up the veil under the taches, that thou mayest bring in thither within the veil the ark of the testimony, and the veil shall divide unto you between the holy place and the most holy."
Yeah.
So we see there's this big veil hanging there, and it's meant to divide these spaces, but it's also meant at certain times and under certain conditions to be traversed. In Isaiah 40:22, we get a picture of God who is beyond the veil. So it says, "It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth," which is something we can talk about later, why the earth is a circle, "that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in." So it says God is in a tent or a veil. That's where he dwells, behind this veil.
Well, and I don't know if there's more answers or parallels or what you think of this, but when you just said dwell and tent, lehi, when it says my father dwelt in a tent.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
There's something there. What was that verse again? It was Isaiah.
Isaiah 40, verse 22.
40, verse 22.
Also, the earth is only...
That what you just said?
The-
That was huge.
I don't want to skip by this too. The Earth is only a circle. It's not a globe.
Because it is flat as well. It is not a sphere. It's a circle, a flat circle. Okay, so sorry. It's Isaiah 40,
Verse 22.
verse 22. Okay, I just want to look at this again. It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are grasshoppers. They stretcheth out to the heavens as curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in.
Okay.
So the circle thing, I'm thinking compass. very much. The symbol of a compass.
Right.
And the symbol of the compass has always been tied to the feminine,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Sorry if I'm ruining it. Am I ruining it?
No, you're not
Am I
ruining
getting
it.
Okay.
Go.
And the other thing that's really interesting is he says he's sitting upon the circle of the earth. And in the ancient Egyptian, the mother, the feminine, was the throne of God.
Yeah.
And so is that am I interpreting
There's
that
certainly some
correctly?
ties
There's some
there,
stuff
for
Okay,
sure.
Cool. That's awesome.
And this idea of a God who, it says he stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain. Like, that's probably more than just metaphor.
Yeah.
There's a curtain, and he says he spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. So he's spreading this curtain of the heavens out to create a dwelling place that's separate from the profane.
Okay.
But like a tent, it's hard to lock a tent, right?
Yes. So it's you're welcome in there. There's just certain things you have to do to get
Right,
past it.
right.
Okay. Cool.
So that sets up this question of what does it mean to approach God? How do you pass through this veil? How do you re-enter his presence? And this was the question for Adam and Eve, right? They were expelled from Eden. They lost the presence of the Lord. And how easy was it for them to return? Like, what was set up in their way?
Yeah, a lot of things.
A lot of things, right? Including cherubim and a flaming sword. Like,
Yes.
this is dangerous, right? So even though it's a veil or a tent or it's easy, seemingly easy, there's definitely preparation that has to go into regaining his presence because it's a little bit dangerous. There's a treacherous journey to be taken.
And the cherubim and the flaming sword are actually on the veil of the temple.
Yeah,
They're sewn
yeah.
in. Okay, cool.
So the veil of the temple, there's a description of it in 2 Chronicles 3. It's chapter 3, verse 14.
Okay. Whoa, chill, bro.
Oh, Jackson. So it says, and he made the veil of blue and purple and crimson and fine linen and wrought cherubims thereon. So there you get the idea of the cherubim on the veil. And that, I think, is representative of these cherubim and the flaming sword that really, I mean, we talk about it as a barrier to Adam and Eve returning to an Edenic state or into the presence of God. In a lot of ways, this was a protection for them. It was that veil was there to protect them from the presence of the Lord because they weren't ready, because they had lost that glory and the ability to be in his presence. I think veils very much do the same for us. They prevent the profane from accessing the sacred too soon when things are not prepared. And it's interesting, the colors that were on this ancient veil, the blue, purple, crimson, so those are believed to have represented earthly elements, air, water, fire. And I've been asked before, why isn't the veil of the temple today like that ancient temple? Because for whatever reason, we think that the temple today can't be valid unless it's identical to the ancient temple. And I say it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Because Christ has come.
We're in a different realm.
And there's some interesting symbolism that happens there. So you think of this very colorful veil hanging in the ancient temple. Some of the, it's got the cherubim. And it was actually said, I think it was Philo of Alexandria, who wrote that this ancient temple had a panoramic history of the earth embroidered on it.
Wow.
And
It's been beautiful.
it must have been beautiful. And actually, there were multiple veils. And they were huge. I think it was something like 300 yards of fabric to make one of these things. And you imagine it's this wool and linen blend. It's very heavy, very ornate. Sometimes they had to clean it. And so this is why they actually had multiples. They could take one down, put another one up while that one was being washed.
Okay.
Apparently it took like
A long time.
tens of people to wash this thing, and they had to lay it out. And of course it has to be done in a proper way because it's a
Sacred.
sacred. Interesting though that okay, so imagine this veil in your mind, right? It's got all these colors. It's got this embroidery. It's this very beautiful piece of artwork, really. A panoramic history of the earth sewn onto it. It has many colors, right? Now, what did the high priest of the temple wear? He wore
the same fabric,
the
right?
same fabric and the same colors.
Okay.
It was actually a coat of many colors.
Many colors. Okay.
So when you think of Joseph, who was sold into Egypt because his brothers didn't like his coat, this wasn't just his brothers being jealous that he got the fancy coat, right?
It's a priesthood thing.
It's a priesthood thing. Yeah, because he's the
really
birthright
cool.
son, and he's inherited this coat of the high priest, so that he can traverse the veil. So there's an interesting, you think the high priest is wearing the same color. He's in essence, he's wearing the veil, right?
Which sounds really familiar,
Right.
to what Latter-day Saints wear.
Yeah.
Right. And so then you see in.
You just barely realize that?
Oh, like I said, I have not slept. I was thinking the
clothes that you wear in the temple.
Yeah, the priesthood robes and stuff like that. And then I was like, oh,
What we wear is the temple, yeah.
dang.
Yeah.
That's epic.
It's what you're wearing. So, light bulbs are going off over here.
Yeah.
It's awesome. A lot of ancient apocryphal writers talk about this. Maybe I shouldn't say a lot, but there are some that talk about that when Christ condescended to earth, which direction was he going through the veil? He wasn't a high priest coming from the earthly realm to the heavenly. Mm-hmm. He was coming from the heavenly realm to the earthly. Mm-hmm. So he was passing through a veil that represented the elements of the earth. He was taking on him mortal flesh.
Yeah.
So because he passed that way, he passed through a veil that indicated the earthly realm.
Okay. So that's why. So real quick. So the colors of the temple represent the material world, right?
Right.
Water. What was it again?
Air, fire,
and
earth.
and
Yeah.
earth, right? And so essentially, the veil is mortality. It is the material world that is keeping us from God.
Right.
And so you wear that on your body. It's okay.
Right.
Cool.
So the high priest is wearing that. And then you get Christ who condescends and passes through that veil into the mortal realm. He's taking on himself the elements of this material world.
Yes.
That gets reversed. And this is why modern temples should not be exact copies of ancient temples, because Christ has come. And we know, he did away with sacrifice, and he said the law of Moses is fulfilled. You don't need to offer animal sacrifices anymore. But think about this for a second. The veil gets reversed, right? Because now it's mortals going to the heavenly realm. And so you're not going to pass through a veil of material colors, because now what you're doing is taking on the characteristics of the heavenly realm. So like Christ, who condescended and took on the characteristics of the mortal realm, now the idea is mortals go back and take on the characteristics of the heavenly realm.
Wow,
so we pass through a veil that looks different.
Yeah.
That looks like that pure realm. And we get a glimpse of this with the high priest back in that ancient temple. Yeah, he wore the coat of many colors, except for one day of the year. Do you know what day that was?
No, I don't.
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur.
Which is
the Day of Atonement. It's coming up. We're getting close. So, and this is something that might sound kind of heretical, and I hope it doesn't, but
Heretic.
I know. So we talk about the atonement like it's just this thing that happened.
Yeah.
Or we talk about it like it is the sacrifice that Christ made in Gethsemane and on the cross. I think that's true, and it's fair to call that the atonement, but I think the atonement is bigger than that. I think that was the redemption. That was Christ paying the bride price for us.
Yeah.
And redeeming our immortal souls. And the cost of that was the blood of an eternal being, the life of an eternal being. So he paid that bride price, right?
Yeah.
Think about the word atonement, though. It's at one meant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that indicates being in his presence, that the atonement is not necessarily the sacrifice that was offered. It's the fact that the redemption was paid so that at some point we can re-enter his presence. We can be at one with him.
Just like he said in the intercessory prayer in John 17, right?
Yeah,
It says
yeah.
that they may be one in me as I am in you, that they may be one together, that oneness.
Right.
Because of his atonement.
Right. So the Day of Atonement isn't the day that the sacrifice is offered. It's the day that the bride and groom see each other. So, because now they are at one, they are together.
Okay.
So yeah, that's coming up. That would be cool if he.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, come on, Jesus. Please come back on that day.
Yeah.
8 days.
So, but to do that, to enter his presence on this Day of Atonement, which is Yom Kippur, the high priest of the ancient temple would, instead of wearing his coat of many colors, he would take that off and put on a white linen robe. Okay. Because now he wasn't in this material world anymore. He was traversing the veil into that celestial world, into that heavenly realm, because he was going to be at one with God, at one with the Lord.
And that is the one day of the year the high priest would go in to the Holy of Holies,
right?
That we learned about.
That he would go in and he would offer the blood sacrifice on the altar.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So the rending of the veil after Christ's resurrection doesn't, as the Protestant world says, oh, this means we don't need temples anymore. Right. It's like, no, you need a new veil.
Yeah, exactly.
It's time to get a new veil. We're done with this one.
Right.
Onto the new veil, because now the doors of heaven have been opened because of the atonement.
Right, because that redemption has been paid. So now it's not an earthly mortal high priest who goes in with the blood to put on the altar. Mm-hmm. It is the great high priest
Christ,
who has offered his own blood as the sacrifice. He has put himself on the altar. So he has traversed that veil. He has traversed that boundary between the material world and the celestial world. And so because he's done that, we don't need that material world veil. Now we need a celestial veil.
Wow, that's
that
really cool.
Also doesn't just admit that one high priest on one day of the year, but now everyone who has been redeemed, who Christ purchased through his blood on the cross, and who now wants to seek that at one-ment with him, can do that. So it's open and available to everyone who will go through that preparation.
That's amazing.
To cross back through that veil.
Well, this is really cool because a lot of times people in the church will be like, well, our temple doesn't really sound like Solomon's temple.
Right.
There are very obviously similarities, right?
Right.
There's like the 3-part ascent.
I think the theology underpinning both is the same.
It's the same, right?
Right.
But the actual ritual practice changes, and why wouldn't it change after the main thing that we focus on is Christ in the temple? After he actually comes and does that great and final sacrifice, why wouldn't the ordinance change in the way that it is done after that? Right?
And it's because it's a reversal. Like what we're seeing here is this huge reversal with Christ on the cross as the central hinge point of that reversal, right? Mm-hmm. So for the thousands of years leading up to Christ, it's man trying to get through the veil and having to sacrifice the blood of animals, trying to get through this veil, trying to get through this this material veil. And the only one who can do it is this high priest on one day of the year who brings in the blood of an animal, but it still doesn't really get the job done, right? So then Christ comes, he does it, and suddenly we get this reversal. Okay, instead of God descending, taking on the mortal realm for us, now it's us ascending and going into the celestial room to be with him, to be at one with him. That's the atonement.
Okay, cool. So if I were to summarize this really quickly, temple before Christ was always pointing towards his condescension.
Right.
Him coming down to
Exactly.
redeem us. after Christ, it is now focused on every single person's ascension.
Exactly.
Because of Christ.
Because of Christ. And
That's
going
cool.
to be at one with him.
That's epic.
Yeah.
And
Holy
also,
cow.
my mind is waking up more and more, and I am like,
The coffee's kicking in now, Jack.
I looked
Yeah,
up.
all the copies are drinking.
I looked up representations, and I'm going to send these pictures to Chris so we can throw these up on the screen. But pictures of the ancient temple, and then comparisons with the priestly robes. And like even just this fact alone, like people make fun of us all the time for magic underwear or whatever, but literally the ancients, they wore this veil as a symbol of Jesus Christ coming to atone for them. And just think about that.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Like that's exactly
Yeah.
what we are doing today. That's exactly what we're doing today.
Right. And so just as Christ condescended through that veil to come here to redeem us, to shed his blood to redeem us, now because he's done that, and one of my favorite verses of scripture is Revelation 1:18, because it's where Christ says that through his sacrifice, he obtained the keys of death and hell. And I like to think of that in a pretty literal sense, because if you think of death, any atheist will tell you, when you die, that's it. You're not coming back, right? And without Christ, that would be true. Hell, we are all fallen. We are all imperfect. We've all screwed it up royally. And what do you do if you break the law? You go to jail, right? So
Yes.
you are locked out either way. You're either stuck in this prison because of the consequences of having broken the law, or you're stuck in death and you can never be saved from that. We have this, I love how the book of Hebrews puts it. We have a great high priest who condescended, and because he did that, he was able to rightfully obtain the keys of death and hell. He can literally unlock those for us. And because he did, we can literally go back through that veil with him. And so in Hebrews, I love how it puts it. This is Hebrews 10, verses 19 and 20. If you guys want to pull those up and read those.
Let's do it. Hebrews 10, 19, and 20.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. I got it right now. I'll read it. It says, having therefore, brethren, boldness to enter into the holiest by the blood of Jesus, into the holiest, okay, by a new and living way, which he hath consecrated for us through the veil, that is to say, his flesh, and having an high priest over the house of God. Let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water.
Yeah. So you see that who is the veil?
Yeah.
It's
Christ.
It's Christ.
Yeah.
He has become the veil. It's not a material boundary anymore. It's not a boundary of the fallen world anymore. The only thing that separates us from God is Christ. And guess how much of a separation he is? None. He has the keys, right? He has those keys. He has the authority. He has the power to return us from this mortal state into the presence of God, to be at one with him.
That's awesome.
If we will just do the preparation that talks about in there.
One thing that's really interesting as well, and this is going back to the Dive Deeper episode, the first Dive Deeper episode that you did, about the living waters and all of that. Like it says, and our bodies washed with pure water.
Right.
As we go through the veil, we are being washed by the pure water, which is Christ as well. And that's beautiful symbolism.
Yeah, it really is.
If the temple didn't matter, why do they use so much temple symbolism and all?
Right. If
this?
we didn't need the temple anymore, why is it saying in those verses that we should prepare ourselves to go back through the veil?
To the veil.
Yeah. So yeah, now instead of this heavy woolly linen blend veil separating us from God, now it's just Christ, and he's not a separation. He's the way, right?
Yeah.
And so if we just come to him with full purpose of heart, he already purchased us with his blood. We belong to him. And all we need to do is say, okay,
Accept it.
I do belong to you. And so because of that, I'm going to be completely loyal to you, like a bride, going back to our last discussion. A true bride is going to be completely loyal to her husband, right? If we will be completely loyal to Christ, and he says, if you love me, keep my commandments. If we love him, like a bridegroom, we keep his commandments. We follow him, right? And he becomes that way, and so he can return us to the presence of the Lord.
And one thing you pointed out in that discussion about the Hebrew wedding tradition is that the purchase of the bride always had the right to veto it, right? And so just because Christ has offered the ultimate dowry for us, we can still reject it. And that's why it comes on to us to accept that and to make that covenant. But with accepting that comes making the covenant of loyalty to Christ.
Exactly.
And so I think that's really beautiful and important for us to remember that the price has been paid. Are we going to accept it or not?
Exactly. So part of that, though, is in order to go through that veil, to have him take us through that veil, we have to be identified with him. So if you think about this in terms of a bride and a groom, the bride takes the name of the bridegroom, right? They become identified as a couple
Together.
So like my husband and I, people refer to us as the Woodmansees, like, because we're one thing now.
Yes.
We're married. And so I think part of traversing the veil, we talked about in the beginning, when Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden, they couldn't get back in to the presence of the Lord. There were fiery angels there with flaming swords. It was dangerous. It was treacherous. Well, now it's not anymore. If we identify ourselves with Christ, we take upon ourselves his name. We take upon ourselves his identifying marks, then we can pass through that veil. And you actually get a glimpse of this in Genesis. I can't quote the chapter off the top of my head. I think it's roughly 20. No, it's not 24. It's later than that. But it's when you see this. It's this weird little story of Jacob and Esau. And, Esau sells his birthright for a mess of pottage. And so then Jacob goes before Isaac to get his blessing, his birthright blessing, because he now owns the birthright. And you have Rebecca there, like putting goat hair on his hands so that when he goes to his father, who's now blind, which blindness is what? It's a veil over the eyes.
Okay.
So Isaac can't see which son this is. So he feels the marks on Jacob's hands, and that's how he identifies him.
Esau was really hairy, right? It talks about him being hairy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so...
You never read this story? Dude, it's
if I haven't recalled.
The Jacob and Esau story is one of the strangest stories.
It is strange until you realize that what this is a son who, because of who he had become and the character he had developed, now has the right to the birthright, but he has to be identified as the actual birthright son.
Yeah.
In order for his father to bless him. So he's coming to a father who's behind a veil, and he's saying, I'm the birthright son, and you can identify me by feeling my hands. And so what's actually happening here is a temple ceremony. So what?
Wow. Well, I'm just thinking about, first off, I always looked at the Jacob, because the thing that's interesting about the Jacob Esau story, because there's tons of stories in the Old Testament where the guy who's supposed to have the birthright ends up giving up his birthright, but because of wickedness.
Right.
Right? But this isn't a situation. That's the one thing that's weird about the story is like Esau doesn't seem like he's a super bad dude.
Right. He's just a regular guy.
He's just a regular guy. And so it makes way more sense that this is a story about Christ essentially giving us his birthright.
Right.
And the mess of pottage represents our weak action, like
our weak attempts
to do it. And he's like, no, I'll take the mess of pottage. You take the birthright.
You take the birthright.
And the feeling of the hands.
And I will give you all the identifying marks because you've come to me. because you want this.
And he has the marks, and it's crazy that he's touching his hands and the marks of the hands. And so how does Thomas recognize that it is Christ when he dies? It is the marks in his hands.
Exactly.
That's very symbolic when it comes to our temple ceremony as well. That's
right. And that's
just
how
amazing.
That's how the Father on the other side of the veil identifies you and blesses you.
Holy cow. I can finally make sense of that weird story.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Andrea, because that is the one where I've always had this, because it doesn't seem to match the same motif of guy who's supposed to have it is actually wicked, so then the younger one gets the birthright.
Right.
That one didn't fall into that same category. It was an outlier.
Right.
But now it makes sense.
Right. Which even some of those stories do, because what we actually have for us is a firstborn son who, obviously not wicked, but who, in a sense, forfeits that birthright so that we can have it. Right. So there is a pattern there, whether the birthright's forfeited legitimately or not.
Yeah.
There's a pattern there of there's this son who acts as the sacrifice to save the one that comes next. So, yeah.
And it's interesting, like the feeling of the hands, right? Like
those
we
are the
can
identifying
feel
marks.
that Jesus Christ is the birthright son because of the marks in his hands.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. That was amazing. This whole conversation is worth it just right there. That was amazing.
Okay. So, yeah, now today we have this a heavenly veil there instead of the material veil, indicating that it's now mankind who's accessing the celestial realm. And we do that through Christ, through his flesh, through his sacrifice. Because of him, because he has those keys, we can traverse this veil. Everybody can.
Yes.
You don't have to just be the one high priest on the one day. You can't say that this is no longer necessary when you look at Revelation chapter 7, if you want to pull that one up.
Okay. Dude, look what happened to my Bible. I need to get a rebound.
That's a sign of some good use.
Hey, if anyone on the channel, because I saw a lady the other day, it's like Alpine
something.
leather binder. If anyone knows a leather binder, I also need help with mine as well.
Yes. This is a call out. We needed someone to rebind our scriptures.
You leather binders out there, comment.
Revelation 7.
Okay, yeah. Look at verse 9.
Okay. You want me to read it?
So, yeah.
No, I want to read it.
Think about this. This is John the Revelator. This is John the Beloved, most likely. Envision seeing what happens when the bridegroom returns and what that heavenly feast looks like, which takes place in the temple.
Cool.
So, okay, go for it.
Chapter 7, verse 9?
Yeah.
Okay. It says, "After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands."
Which is an ancient symbol of kinghood, right? This is how they would hail a king. So you have here in a heavenly temple, in a temple realm, multitudes clothed in white linen. It's not just one high priest, right? It's not one high priest who went into the Holy of Holies on the Day of Atonement.
Everybody.
It's everybody. And they're not wearing a coat of many colors.
White robes.
They're wearing white robes because they've traversed that veil, the heavenly veil, to re-enter the heavenly realm. So that's the goal. That's what Adam and Eve lost and what we regain through Christ. So that paints a picture of it. But you see it also in some apocryphal texts, which we need Jonah Barnes here for that, right?
Yeah.
But 2nd Enoch says, "Go and take Enoch from out of his earthly garments, shining like the sun's ray." So it's saying, strip Enoch of his earthly garments. Pull off kind of your street clothes, probably even your mortal body.
Yeah.
And let's go into this heavenly realm and get an immortal body. And it says he was shining like the sun's ray. Now, how bright is the sun? Like, you can't even look at it, right?
Look at it without. I mean, you can, but then you're not going to be able to look at anything else.
Yeah, it's not recommended. Same thing in Zechariah 3:7. You want to read that one?
Real quick, that's actually beautiful. I made it as a joke, right? But at the same time, the whole idea of you saying that the veil is there to protect us as well.
Yeah.
It's similar to looking at the sun.
Right.
You can't if you look at the sun, even though the sun's beautiful and even though we need the sun and the sun gives us light, if you look at the sun, your mortal frame will be damaged. Because of it,
right. And this is why that veil, in a sense, is protection.
They're
for
sunglasses.
us mortals.
They're like spiritual sunglasses to make sure that we don't get burned up.
For sure.
You said Zechariah what?
Let's actually go Zechariah 3, 1 through 8.
1 through 8? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll read that.
Okay, so this is Zechariah 3, 1 through 8.
Okay. And he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him. This is one of the few times Satan is even mentioned in the Old Testament.
Right.
Yes.
So to set the stage here, we have the high priest in a temple setting. Satan's there resisting him. Okay? So if you think it's weird if Satan shows up like in a temple setting, he did in the Garden of Eden. He's always there to try to stop your progress towards the Lord. Okay? And here we have the high priest on his way to the veil, and Satan's there trying to prevent him. Okay, keep going.
Oh my gosh. We need to show this to Dave Butler. Why didn't Dave put this in the language of Adam when he was making his argument? This is amazing. And the Lord said unto Satan, the Lord rebuke thee, O Satan, even the Lord that hath chosen Jerusalem, rebuke thee. Is not this a brand plucked out of the fire? Now Joshua was clothed with filthy garments and stood before the angel.
Okay, and remember, an angel is generally a messenger. So you could even think of the temple workers as angels, right? They're messengers. They're working in the temple. Sometimes when I've gone through, especially in the beginning, they actually were angels.
Margaret Barker, she like unambiguously says that the angels many times are just talking about the people who were in the temple. That were officiating. And he answered and spake unto those that stood before him, saying, Take away the filthy garments from him. And unto him he said, Behold, I have caused thine iniquity to pass from thee, and I will clothe thee with change of raiment.
Okay, so why are we changing clothes here?
Because he's going to be entering into a new realm.
Yeah, you can't go into that realm wearing your filthy rags from mortality, right? You're going to become a more refined celestial kind of person through Christ.
This is one of the most explicit like temple things that I've read in the
Keep reading, bro.
Yeah.
Can we keep reading?
Yeah.
And I said, Let them set a fair mitre above his head.
What is that?
That's the hat that the high priest wore in the temple. Looks
so
sort
he's
of like
getting
a turban.
dressed.
He's
Yes.
getting dressed here.
So they set a fair mitre upon his head and clothed him with garments, and the angel of the Lord stood by. And the angel of the Lord protested unto Joshua, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, If thou wilt walk in my ways, and if thou wilt keep my charge, then thou shalt also judge my house, and shalt also keep my courts, and I will give thee places to walk among these that stand by.
Okay, so pause there for 1 second.
I just had another crazy.
Think about this. It says the angel of the Lord protested unto Joshua. I don't think the word there is protested. I don't think he was holding up signs and going crazy. Like he's actually, I think it's more of a warning to Joshua, saying, and an explanation saying, okay, you're approaching the veil. Don't take this lightly. Do all the things you're supposed to do. Make sure you're doing this worthily, which we can have a separate discussion about what worthy means.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think maybe we set the bar too high for ourselves. And
what that actually means, yeah.
Yeah. That I think something that if you consider yourself worthy, you consider yourself being of worth to do this. It's something that has worth and value. So certainly there are worthiness standards. I don't want to undermine that. But we talk about being worthy to take the sacrament. Like, I think are you coming to the sacrament as a thing of worth? This has worth and value to you such that you will do what it takes to prepare yourself to take that because it has that worth to you. You don't take it casually, right?
Yeah.
You don't take it saying, well, yeah, I've done all these things. And I don't really care. I'm just going to take it. I'm just going to do it. It's saying, I care about this. This has worth and value to me. So because of that, I will prepare myself.
That is so interesting because a lot of times, yes, because they're so interconnected, because if I value and hold as sacred the temple, then I'm not going to live a life that is contrary to the commandments of God and then think, oh, it's okay, I can live however I want to live and then go to the temple, because then you're not valuing the temple as a sacred place.
Right.
And it's not worth anything to you.
Right. You're not taking it seriously. It doesn't have that value to you. You're just doing it to do it.
You turn the sacred space into profane.
Exactly.
So then if the sacrament is just bread and water on Sunday, then if you're living in a way very contrary to the commandments of God and then just taking the sacrament anyway, then it's not worth anything to you. Therefore,
taking the name of God in vain.
Right. Which is actually what it means.
Which is literally what it means. You're taking Christ's name.
You're taking his name for vanity's sake, not because it's
in
worth
vain.
something.
Yeah, I never thought about that. For vanity's sake, it's to be seen outwardly.
Exactly.
That's what that means. That's
Which
actually
is
really
also
awesome.
why the temple garment is kept covered, because this isn't a vanity thing to show off to the world. Oh, I went through the temple, I did these things.
For sure.
No, this isn't a status symbol. This is for you. This is because that veil is staying with you.
Worthiness has taken on a whole. Sorry, I just
It's awesome.
It has taken on a whole new meaning in my head, because it's not because if we truly understand what's in the scriptures, then we're going to understand that we need to raise our bar in terms of how we live our lives to be able to come closer to being like God.
But it's raising the bar from the heart. It's not a checklist just got longer thing. It's the heart. It's the love. It's the loyalty to Christ. That's the motivation for coming to the sacrament table, for coming to the temple. And so I think the reverse of that is sometimes people beat themselves up and think, I keep screwing this thing up and I shouldn't go to the temple. But it's no, if you're keeping your temple covenants and the temple has that value for you, it is worth it to you. Don't keep yourself out.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love this idea that we've been talking about, that the veil, so the commandments also act as a veil.
Right.
Almost, or that's
a really great point.
Where it's that's what keeps us. So once we keep those, we can part the veil.
Yeah.
Right. Once we do that, and it's for our safety in the end. So that way we don't look up at the sun without sunglasses and go blind.
Right. Which is, I think, going back to this passage in Zechariah, this is not the angel protesting. This is the angel or the helper there warning him, not in a mean warning sense. It's hey, look, if you don't do this worthily, if you aren't taking this seriously and this doesn't have value to you, intrinsic value in your heart, don't do this.
Yes.
Because this is serious. God will not be mocked. Not because he's offended, but because of what it means to enter his presence. This is not something to be taken lightly.
It will destroy you if you mock God.
Right.
And that's why he won't be mocked.
Right.
Right here, I'm looking up the Hebrew word for protest there, and it means to return, to go about, to repeat, to do again. So I think repeat might be the best, where it says,
that's a great word.
Yeah, the Lord repeated unto Josiah, saying,
Joshua.
Yeah, Joshua. Now, real quick with Joshua, that I recognize, Joshua is actually the name of Jesus.
That is his name.
Yeah, is his name. It's Yeshua. And this is just because a lot of people might Jesus' name isn't Joshua. The reason why we call Jesus is because we read from a Greek New Testament, and the Greeks did not have a sh sound, and so they had to change Yeshua's name to something that
and their
worked
names
in their
also
language.
ended with an S, not an
S. Yes. So. And so Jesus isn't his actual name. Yeshua is. And so right in here, you're having this person who is taken on. So Yeshua, and when we are going through the temple, we are taking on the name of Yeshua.
Exactly.
As we're going through. So that's another
Yeah.
amazing symbolism here.
So you get to this point that you just read in verse 7, I'm repeating this to you. I'm reminding you that if you continue on this walk walk in his ways,
Mm-hmm.
keep those commandments, keep all the charges you've been given. And then you'll be made a judge in my house. What does that mean? What's the house? It's the house of Israel,
Yeah.
right? And if you're a judge in the house of Israel, you've attained that, right?
it.
Those are some of the temple promises.
Can we read the rest of this
Yeah,
chapter?
keep
Because
going.
I'm reading
Keep
it
going.
now and
Yeah.
my mind is exploding. Okay. So right now, what we just barely read is that the angel of the Lord pretty much says, hey, here, this is what you need to keep if you're going to enter into the next part.
Right,
essentially, right?
By the way, sorry, I don't
No,
mean
go
to
ahead.
interrupt you,
It's all
but
good.
if Joseph Smith made this up, like
The whole temple. It's amazing.
there's no way.
Yeah.
There is no way. We get hints of it here that we understand because we've been through the temple.
Yes.
But
He's not
like,
reading Zechariah
he's not
3
reading
and then
this
being like,
putting
okay,
it
how do we put
together.
it together?
This is not a farm boy in the 1820s going, hey, I'm going to create this ritual. How should I do it? Maybe I'll like piece it together from like a scrap here in the Old Testament and a piece there. Like, no. The temple is a restoration of the ancient covenant given to us post-Christ because it reverses that first temple and sends us back into the presence of God. Like, Joseph Smith didn't come up with this.
Sure.
Like,
And this next verse has something very
Yes.
familiar. Hear now, O Joshua, the high priest, thou and thy fellows that sit before thee, for they are men wondered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant, the branch. So,
Yeah.
once again, Lehi's vision of the tree of life, which is the word of God. Who is the word of God? It is Christ. Who is the Lord's servant? Christ, who is also the branch.
Yeah.
And so right before he's entering into the Holy of Holies, there is a branch that is reaching out to him.
Yeah.
For
Yeah. And who are these men, these fellows to be wondered at?
What is your understanding with that?
I think it's the heavenly host.
Oh yeah,
It's the divine
heavenly host
council.
things, yes.
It's you have these celestial beings that you're now entering the presence of, and they should be met with wonder and awe and probably a little bit of fear and trembling, right?
Yeah.
Like,
No, that's really awesome. I gotta finish.
Yeah,
I'm so
keep going,
excited
keep
for this.
going.
For behold, the stone that I have laid before Joshua, upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave the graving thereof, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall ye call every man his neighbor under the vine and under the fig tree. And so you end in the presence of the tree.
right, right.
And every man
And sometimes we think
is
the
called
fig
under
tree is
there.
a bad thing because it's what Adam and Eve tried to cover themselves up with.
yeah the
It's-
fig leaves.
Not a bad thing because look where they end up.
Yes.
They're at the fig tree. And there's a lot of symbolism we could dive into about figs. But have you ever bitten into a fig?
He's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really good. What's inside?
A pit.
No.
No,
it's
it's a bunch of tiny seeds.
Hundreds of tiny seeds.
Well, aren't date? Oh no, figs are different. I'm
Yeah,
so sorry.
not
Yeah,
dates. Dates
I was
are
thinking
great
of a
too,
date.
but yeah.
No, figs.
Figs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's actually really weird fruit when you bite into it. You're like,
So
yeah,
good.
there's tons of seeds.
Yeah, tons of seeds. Just ponder that. We'll maybe talk about that
Okay,
some
now
other
I get
time.
the
What?
connection there. Partaking the figs. We're talking about seed. That's definitely a temple thing that happens in the right before the Holy of Holies. That's amazing.
Think about eternal families. We think our eternal family is like our nuclear family, and we're going to live in a nice celestial castle all together.
Yeah, yeah.
And we won't fight anymore,
Yeah, it's much bigger than
which
that.
would be great. But it's bigger than that, right? This is Joseph Smith talked about the continuation of the seeds.
Yes.
Like an eternal family is a family that extends eternally in all directions. It is seeds that extend and expand in all directions. And a fig tree is very emblematic of that.
I can't believe we haven't read Zechariah 3 yet. I mean, we've been on this whole like temple and the scriptures journey for, almost a year
we got to
now.
read this with Dave and just
See what his thoughts are. Maybe he knows about it. That is amazing.
I'm sure he knows about it. He's a walking encyclopedia.
It's true. Oh my gosh.
That's why he's
He's
so
just been
tall. 'cause
hoarding it
he's
from
like
us?
the whole encyclopedia on legs.
Yeah.
Sweet. We got, yeah.
Okay. So
24 minutes left.
Till the car shows up.
Yeah, but she'll be running out. We got to do this for the camera. The people want her.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Milk every minute.
but so going back, we talked about Enoch and how he was stripped of the earthly garments and then he's shining, right? And now we see this same thing here happening in Zechariah with Joshua. He's stripped of his earthly garments. He enters the presence of these beings to be wondered at. He's in this heavenly realm. Probably the most famous instance we have of something like this in the scriptures is Moses. When he goes up to Sinai, what does he look like when he comes back down?
Glowing.
Glowing so brightly that he has to do what?
Veil his face.
He has to veil his face because he's been through the veil and he's coming back. So he's bringing
Shaking off the
part
veil
of the
dust.
veil with him and he's veiling his face because he has that radiance, that glory that would otherwise be dangerous to those who aren't prepared for it.
He's putting sunglasses on himself for everybody else,
Right,
essentially, so
right.
they don't burn their eyes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then this is also where that sneaky little Joseph Smith managed to like just pull these strands in and weave them into the Book of Mormon so nefariously, right?
Yep.
Okay, go to Alma 550.
Okay.
I'm so gassed up, bro.
I didn't think you were gonna be able to do this again. I was like, the first one was a fluke. You know, you shared some cool stuff, but
All right, Alma 5 what?
Chapter 5, verse 50.
okay.
All right. It says, Yea, thus saith the Spirit, repent all ye ends of the earth, for the kingdom of heaven is soon at hand. Yea, the Son of God cometh in his glory, in his might, majesty, power, and dominion. Yea, my beloved brethren, I say unto you, that the Spirit saith, Behold, the glory of the King of all the earth, and also the King of heaven, shall very soon shine forth among all the children of men.
What does the King of Heaven do?
Shine forth.
Shines, like literally shining like Moses, right? And this goes back to Numbers, I think it's chapter 6, verse 25, roughly. There's this high priestly blessing where it says, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you. The only way the Lord's face can shine upon you is if that veil is parted, if that veil is lifted, right?
Yeah.
Wait, and right a couple of verses after, it says, cry forth and repent. But then in 52, right after that, it says, and again I say unto you that the Spirit saith, Behold, the axe is laid at the root of the tree. Therefore, every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit shall be hewn down and cast into the fire. Yea, a fire which cannot be consumed, even an unquenchable fire. Behold, and remember the Holy One hath spoken it.
So, sorry, I this might be a little bit of a tangent, but I want to get your thoughts on this because I've often thought about the Adam and Eve story. I've said this multiple times on the channel. I think it is the story of stories. You can look at it from 1,000 different lenses, and it is true in all those lenses. That's why it has stood the test of time.
Right.
One of the ways I've looked at the Garden of Eden story is it is the story of the pre-existence and even the war in heaven, right? And so when you're talking about how the Christ comes down and now we're going in reverse back into it. Like I've always thought about the garments of skin. So essentially this decision is made. I think Eve knowingly makes a decision to some degree or another. She knows like what she obviously knows what she's doing. She knows the consequences of it, right? She makes that willingly. And then what happens is they give them a coat of skins. Now, obviously that represents the atonement and all of this,
Right.
but it can also represent mortality.
Exactly.
Right, so-
because in many respects, the fall, I think, represents our birth into mortality.
Yes.
And this is why Christ says we need a second birth, one that reverses the first and goes back into his presence through that veil.
Yeah, which is a huge deal. Let's because when Nicodemus is like, oh, are you saying that I should enter into my mother's womb a second time? And Jesus says, verily, verily, I say unto you, unless a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. The way that we understand that, and even the chosen, well, one of my criticisms, it's an amazing thing, but one of my criticisms is when they're having that conversation, Nicodemus says that, and Jesus is kind of like, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is baptism or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But verily, verily actually means amen, amen. So what Jesus is saying when Nicodemus asks, are you saying I need to be born or enter into my mother's womb again?
He's saying, yeah.
He's saying, yes, yes. Unless a man be born of water, so mortal, that's a mortal birth,
right.
And of the Spirit, that's you entering back into your mother's womb,
right.
He cannot enter into the kingdom of God.
Right. Now, going back to the fig full of seeds, what is that?
So it's fruit. It's
fruit full of seeds.
Full of seeds.
What is that emblematic of?
A woman.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Wow. Yes. Wow. Holy cow.
Fig tree, bro.
Fig tree.
Bro.
Okay. So.
Goodness.
I guess in the interest of time, I have one more verse for you. So we saw in Alma that the king of the earth, it says, the glory of the king of all the earth, the glory of the king of heaven shall shine forth among the children of men. The veil will be removed. His face will shine upon you, right? Go to Alma chapter 40, verse 25.
Alma chapter 40, verse
25.
I call reading it.
Dude, I know. Whenever she asks us to read, I want to read it because I want to be the one that.
Okay, actually, we'll back up a little bit. Let's go to
23.
Let's start in 23 and go through to 25.
Epic. Welcome, Jay. We got a watcher.
We're
here.
about to finish.
We're about to finish. You just missed something amazing. So, all right. So 23. The soul shall be restored to the body, and the body to the soul. Yea, and every limb and joint shall be restored to its body. Yea, even a hair of the head shall not be lost, but all things shall be restored to their proper and perfect frame.
I'll pause you there for a second. That sounds really nice. That sounds like resurrection. I want you to think of that in temple terms. Okay?
Perfect.
Think of words spoken in the temple, and if these words sound anything like that. Okay.
And now, my son, this is the restoration of which has been spoken by the mouths of the prophets. And then shall the righteous shine forth into the kingdom of God. Okay, I totally get what you're saying now about 23. Okay, holy cow. And it's things that we can't really talk about.
I'm not going to go into it. I just want to throw that bone out there for you to ponder and study in your own time.
Yes.
But it ends with, so there's a blessing and a promise given there in 23. And it ends with the righteous, not the king shining forth now. Now it's the righteous shining forth because they've entered into his presence. They've passed that veil. They're in his presence. This is where they're glorified. And we have that shining that we saw with Moses, that we saw in Zechariah, that we saw with Enoch.
Yeah. And this next verse is awesome right here. I'll just read it. But behold, an awful death cometh upon the wicked, for they die as to things pertaining to things of righteousness. For they are unclean. So going back to the dirty garments that were thrown off from Joshua. They are unclean, and no unclean thing can inherit the kingdom of God. But they are cast out and consigned to partake of the fruits of their labors or their works, which have been evil, and they drink the dregs of a bitter cup. Once again, all of these things end with fruit. It ends with a tree. And it's crazy because right here it's talking about how the wicked will partake of their fruit based on what they have sown, right? But that also means that the righteous are partaking of their fruit.
Yes.
Based on what they have.
Yes.
So once again, the tree of life motif at the end of all this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Okay. I lied. I said that was the last verse.
Okay. Let's go another one.
Okay. Doctrine and Covenants 101. We're just going to hit all of the standard works because this stuff is just woven throughout because Joseph Smith was such an evil genius that he managed to weave this stuff in there.
I know. The consistent complexity of all of the standard works is the greatest testament to Joseph Smith being a prophet because it is so consistently complex and it's amazing.
I mean, for us who've been through the temple multiple times, I've been going for 20 plus years, it's like I'm still stumbling on this stuff that just blows my mind. And it's like, oh, it was right there the whole time, but I didn't see it until now.
And he never told anyone about it, too.
Right.
Like, that's the thing that's wild, is he puts all this stuff in there and then says nothing.
And he seems to not really know anything about it.
Yeah, and if he does know something about it, he's just kind of like, I'll let them figure out.
What a
Right.
beast.
We'll wait for the stick of Joseph to come out.
What verse? What verse?
Okay, Doctrine and Covenants 101. Let's do 22 and 23.
All right. 22 and 23. Behold, it is my will that all they who call on my name and worship me according to mine everlasting gospel should gather together and stand in holy places and prepare for the revelation which is to come.
Okay, pause for a second. So stand in a holy place. Where is that?
The
It's
temple.
the temple, right?
Temple.
You're gathering together
For the
according to the
revelation.
everlasting gospel. It's not just the restored gospel, it's the everlasting gospel. And prepare for the revelation that's to come. How are things revealed? What happens when something is revealed?
unveiled.
It's unveiled.
Well,
Okay.
it says,
Yeah.
when the veil of the covering of my temple in my tabernacle, which hideth the earth, shall be taken off, and all flesh shall see me together.
Okay. So, this veil between heaven and earth will eventually be removed, and we will that atonement will be complete when we are all in his presence and we can withstand the shining because we've taken that glory too, right?
Yeah, and I just got to point out in these verses that follow, without getting into all of them, and everyone should get out D&C 101, read this, but there are some very key words. So it talks about a tree. It talks about trees after this. It talks about the things, most precious things that are above and things that are beneath the earth. So it's talking about things that are precious. It's talking about joy. It is talking about wisdom. Seek the face of God. Like, there's so much there.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so to go back to where we started now, why veil a woman? Why veil a bride? Like, what is that? So I love the story of Rebecca. This is the Genesis 24 story. So Abraham's servant, Eliezer, sent off to go find a bride for Isaac. And he goes and he finds Rebecca. And there's so much symbolism in the story that we don't have time to get into. But he brings Rebecca back, and she's riding on a camel. If you go to Genesis 24, verse 65.
Yep.
See, I keep throwing more scriptures in here. I'm never
gosh.
done with the scriptures.
We're so tired of the scriptures at the Sick of Joseph.
There's so much more to be discovered, always.
Yep. So 24.
Verse 65. I think that's the right verse. Let's see.
Yeah. For she had said unto the servant, what man is this that walketh in the field to meet us?
Oh, wait. Back up
that one.
to 63.
Okay, yeah. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field at the eventide. And he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, the camels were coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she lighted off the camel.
Okay.
What does that mean?
This kind of sounds like she lit the camel on fire, but that's not what happened.
It says she dismounted. Okay.
Okay, but it's more than dismounted. So picture this scene in your mind, right? Isaac probably has some idea roughly when Eliezer will return with his bride. You think he might be a little anxious. So he's out in the field meditating. He's probably praying, please let her be pretty.
Yeah.
So what does he do when he realizes the camels are coming? He lifted up his eyes, right? And then what does Rebecca do?
She lifted up her eyes.
They both lift up their eyes, which is beautiful in thinking about a marriage. If you want your marriage to work, what should you both do?
Be looking at each other. Yeah, look up.
Look up. Okay. So then she lighted off her camel, which if you dig into the Hebrew there, she didn't gingerly get off the camel. She didn't just dismount.
Jumped.
She jumped. Like that Hebrew word that's translated as lighted, and other places it means like somebody who fell or jumped out. Like she got off this camel like she meant it. She was excited. But the other, so then go to 65.
It said, For she had said unto the servant, What man is this that walketh in the field to meet us? And the servant had said, It is my master. Therefore she took a veil and covered herself.
So it's interesting, right? She hadn't apparently been veiled on the camel as she's traveling with Eliezer this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
She only veils herself when she encounters the bridegroom. Okay?
And the thing that's really cool right here. So yeah, I looked up that word, nafal. It means to fall. Like she
She was
fell
like,
off her camel essentially.
so how excited, how much anticipation should we have to meet our heavenly bridegroom?
Mm-hmm.
Like we should do everything it takes to prepare ourselves for that, right? It should fill us with so much excitement and desire to finally be in the presence of our bridegroom.
But then in 67, it said, and Isaac brought her into his
mother's
Sarah's tent and took Rebekah, and she became his wife.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a ton of symbolism in that verse. We don't have time to unpack that one.
That's a wild verse.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting. She takes this veil. She hadn't been veiled the whole time traveling on this camel. It's when she encounters the bridegroom that she puts a veil over her face. Why? And I'm not saying I have the one and only answer.
Yeah.
But I think if you think of this in temple terms, or even in terms of modern weddings, traditional weddings, you know, my dad walked me down the aisle and I had that veil over my face, and my father unveiled me and presented me to my husband. A bride should be veiled up until the point she meets her husband and is presented to the husband, and then the veil is removed when she is finally in his presence.
Yeah.
When that marriage is about to happen, that's when the veil is removed.
When the covenant has been made. Everything up to that point, everything before the marriage is just kind of, you know, it's all words. But
Right.
once that covenant made, then the veil can be removed.
Yeah, and sometimes it is done that way where it's like, okay, now you can kiss your bride, and you do it that way. That's a traditional way to do it too.
Yeah.
But so there have been some recent changes to the temple.
Yeah, that's why I was just thinking, like, why?
Yeah. I don't know why. I can't say that I was in that meeting where that decision was made and I know the reasons for it. All I can do is guess. But certainly there's kind of I would say the easy answer is, well, in our modern era, feminist era, women don't like wearing veils. It seems like they're being subservient.
Yeah, it's kind of the cynical answer. It's like,
Right.
oh, the church just bowed because, you know, the angry feminists were like, why do we have to wear veils?
Right.
Or,
Because maybe we're not teaching this stuff, bro.
yeah, maybe
If
there's
that's the
Right.
reason.
Well, maybe, yeah, but, or.
Well, actually, I don't
what's
know.
the
Maybe
other-
there's some symbolism
Because I think
to
there's
it.
some symbol. I'm probably.
Or
This
Jesus
is
about
a
to show up.
I will
Yeah.
say this is a tantalizing possibility, and nothing more than a possibility. A supposition is a bride is unveiled right before the wedding, right before you enter the presence of, yeah.
Yeah, so because in our last conversation that we had, we talked about the symbol that the church came up with, tuba and all that sort of stuff. We're talking about how the angel Moroni's aren't on temples anymore because we're past the point where his friends running up and saying he's coming, like he's come, like we're getting
Bro,
there.
could it be?
And so the veil.
Is it all just coincidence?
Did that all happen? That all happened around the same time.
Yeah, it did.
Like it all kind of just happened. They're like, all right,
Yeah.
move on to the next phase.
Right.
And I understand why some people would be cynical about it and be like, oh, they're
Right.
just bowing. But maybe that's not the case. And I think
And here's
this is
the
a
thing:
really good
is
case for it.
sometimes I've seen people before that have this sense that, you know, the temple ceremony should just be this one salvific ritual that you go through, and so therefore it should never change.
Yeah.
It actually should change because it's teaching us something about the time and place that we're in.
Now.
So now, and where we are, we talk about our relationship with Jesus Christ. There's something to be said about our relationship to Jesus Christ. Where are we relative to Christ? And the temple teaches us something about that too.
Wow.
So
Well, let's
We're
figure it
close.
out, people. Thank you so
We're
much
close.
for watching this. You're gonna miss your plane if we don't end this now.
Well, also her Uber driver is Saul, and so
Saul's waiting.
He's waiting.
go into this and change him into Paul. Okay.
Even Paul. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Andrea, you are amazing. She is working on a book right now. She actually signed a ketubah last
did.
night.
I sent
don't
it
know
over
where
there,
it's at.
yeah.
But she signed a ketubah last night where she is officially writing a book for Plain and Precious Publishing. If you want that book when it comes out, then link is in the description. You can sign up and you will be among the first who gets an email when it is live. Andrea, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's
And
been fun.
until next time, stay curious and hungry. Holy cow, how did you do it again?
the thing. I wasn't able to process like.